February 10th, 1962. 2:15 p.m. Wells Restaurant, Harlem, New York. The man who walked into Wells didn't look like the son of a devil. He looked like an accountant from Queens, which, in a way, he was. He was soft in the middle, his suit a respectable but unremarkable gray flannel, his face round and earnest, holding none of the jagged violence of his father's famous photographs. But the name preceded him like a foghorn in the dark. Capone. Albert Francis, Sonny Capone. He scanned the room, his eyes blinking in the dim, smoky light, a man clearly out of his element. He was looking for Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy sat in his usual booth at the back, a chessboard before him, the white queen held loosely between his thumb and forefinger. He saw the hesitation in the man's posture, the way his shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. This was not the heir to an empire. This was the survivor of a cataclysm. Bumpy gestured with a slight nod. His man, Junebug, a shadow with quiet feet and watchful eyes, intercepted Sonny and guided him to the booth. "Mr. Johnson," Sonny began, his voice softer than Bumpy expected. He extended a hand that was surprisingly damp. "Thank you for seeing me. I'm Albert Capone." Bumpy took the hand. The grip was weak. "I know who you are," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the worn leather of the seat. He didn't offer a smile. Respect, in his world, wasn't measured in pleasantries. "Your father and I, we never crossed paths. Different cities, different businesses. But a man's name means something. Sit." Sonny slid into the booth, his movements careful. He placed a worn briefcase on the table, away from the chessboard. "I know this is an imposition. My father, he passed years ago. I don't have any connection to his life. I run a small import business. Florist supplies. From Miami." Bumpy considered the white queen, then placed her deliberately on H6, threatening the black king. "Check. Flowers," he said, the word hanging in the air. "A respectable trade." "I'm trying," Sonny said, and for the first time, a flicker of his father's intensity showed in his eyes. It wasn't menace, it was a deep, abiding exhaustion. "I'm in New York to meet a supplier, a man in the Bronx. But this city, it still feels like his city, you know? The papers, the whispers. I thought, as a matter of respect, I should come to Harlem first. To you. To let you know my intentions are clean. I'm not here to step on any toes. Just a simple business trip." Bumpy understood immediately. This wasn't a request for partnership. It was a plea for safe passage. The son of Al Capone was asking for protection in his own father's old stomping grounds, a ghost seeking sanctuary from other ghosts. The irony was as thick as the cigar smoke in the room. Bumpy felt a strange stirring, not of pity, but of a shared understanding of legacy. He, too, was a king, and he knew the weight of the crown, how it could feel like a shroud. "You came to the right place," Bumpy said, his gaze fixed on the board. "Harlem is my house. While you're in my house, you are a guest. Nobody will trouble you. You have my word." He looked up from the game, his eyes locking with Sonny's. "But let me give you a piece of advice. A name like yours is a heavy coat to wear in the winter. It keeps you warm, but it can also suffocate you. Be mindful of who helps you carry it." Sonny visibly relaxed, a wave of relief washing over his strained features. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Truly, that's all I wanted. My business is 2 days. Then I'm back to Miami. To my wife, my daughters. Family," Bumpy said, the word a statement of fact. "That's the only kingdom that matters." He moved his rook, trapping the black king. "Checkmate." He offered Sonny a cup of coffee, and they talked for another hour. Not about crime or history, but about daughters, the rising price of goods, and the unpredictable Florida weather. When Sonny left, Bumpy watched him walk out into the Harlem afternoon, a man trying desperately to outrun a shadow that was stitched to his own feet. He seemed so fragile, so utterly disconnected from the brutal myth of his father. The betrayal, when it came, was not from a rival mob or a federal informant. It came from a whisper, a powder, a poison that had begun to seep into the cracks of Bumpy's own kingdom, a betrayal of the very sanctuary he had just promised. Witness testimony, Junius Junebug Henderson, recorded 1988. "I was there. I was always there. When that fella, Capone's kid, came in, Bumpy treated him like royalty. Not because of the name, not really. It was because the man was trying to be clean. Bumpy respected that. He respected any man trying to climb out of a hole, even if it was a hole his own father dug for him. Bumpy gave his word, and his word was scripture on the streets of Harlem. If he said a man was safe, that man could walk through hell in a gasoline suit and not get singed. That's what we all thought. What he thought. The thing is, the devil you know is one thing. The Genovese family, the cops on the take. Bumpy knew how to play that game. He wrote the rules. But this new thing, this China White they called it, that was different. It wasn't a gangster. It wasn't a cop. It was a plague. It didn't respect rules or territory. It just consumed. And it was already in the house. Bumpy didn't see it coming. None of us did. He promised that man safety. And in the end, the most dangerous thing in Harlem wasn't a man with a gun. It was a needle in a darkroom. February 13th, 1962. 11:40 a.m. Office above the Capri Social Club, Harlem. The call came from Sonny Capone's hotel, the Teresa, a place Bumpy owned in spirit if not on paper. The manager was panicked. Mr. Capone's room was paid up for another night, but he hadn't been seen since yesterday afternoon. His briefcase was still in the room. His bed hadn't been slept in. Bumpy stood at the window, looking down at the controlled chaos of 125th Street. The news was an irritant, not yet an alarm. Men like Sonny, men with names, sometimes sought anonymity. A woman, a bottle, a card game. Still, a promise was a promise. Junebug, Bumpy said without turning. Get some eyes on the street. Check the usual spots. The jazz clubs, the after-hours joints. Ask quiet. No noise. On it, Bump. By evening, the quiet questions had turned up nothing. The irritation was hardening into concern. Bumpy sat in his office, the phone silent, the city outside growing dark. He felt a prickle of unease. He had given his word. The integrity of that word was the foundation of his power. A threat to Sonny Capone was a threat to him. He started to think in terms of his enemies. The Italians downtown? Unlikely. They wouldn't dare cross him over a nobody, even a Capone. A stick-up crew who got lucky? Possible, but they'd have sent a ransom note by now. The first false alarm came just after midnight. A frantic call from an informant. February 14th, 1962. 12:22 a.m. They got him, Bump. I heard it from a guy who knows a guy. Some of Joe Gallo's boys. Snatched him right off Lenox Avenue. They're holding him in Red Hook. The rage was instantaneous and cold. The Gallos were unpredictable, violent animals. A clear violation of territory and treaty. Bumpy's entire demeanor shifted. The concerned host became the avenging king. Get the cars, he ordered Junebug, his voice dangerously low. Get the hardware. We're going to Brooklyn. For 2 hours, Bumpy's world was clear, his purpose defined. This was a language he understood. He would descend on Red Hook with righteous fire and burn them out. He would bring Sonny Capone back, and he would leave a message written in blood that would be read for generations. His men, loyal and lethal, assembled with silent efficiency. The weight of Bumpy's fury was a palpable force in the room. Then, the second call came. It was from the same informant, his voice now shaking with fear. February 14th, 1962. 2:37 a.m. Bump, hold up. It ain't true. My guy was wrong. He was just running his mouth. It wasn't the Gallos. I swear to God, it wasn't them. It was just street talk. The energy in the room dissipated, replaced by a tense, confusing silence. Bumpy took the phone. He didn't yell. He spoke with a chilling calm. You're sure? God is my witness, Bump. It was a lot. Bumpy hung up. The rage, having no target, curdled into something far worse, dread. A kidnapping, a mob hit. Those were problems with solutions. This was a void. Sonny Capone had simply vanished. He had been erased. It was Junebug who brought the first piece of the real story, an hour before dawn. He'd been leaning on a low-level numbers runner, a kid with eyes everywhere. The kid had been terrified to speak, not of gangsters, but of something else. He wasn't snatched, Bump, Junebug said, his face grim in the lamplight of the office. He was seen, yesterday evening, going into a tenement on 117th Street, with Little Vic. Bumpy went still. Little Vic was one of his own dealers. A reliable earner, but one who had recently started pushing a new product. A purer, more potent brand of heroin that Bumpy had explicitly forbidden his top men from touching directly. He allowed the numbers and the protection rackets, even the weed, but he had a deep-seated hatred for the needle. It was a poison that destroyed the customer, and a destroyed customer was bad for business and worse for the community. He saw it as a white man's plague sent to rot Harlem from the inside out. What kind of tenement? Bumpy asked, though he already knew the answer. A shooting gallery, Bump, Junebug said softly. One of the worst. The world tilted. The betrayal wasn't from an outside enemy. It was a cancer within his own body. Little Vic, his man, had sold poison to his guest, the son of Al Capone, a man under his personal protection. The systemic destroyer wasn't a rival family. It was the insatiable, immoral appetite of the heroin trade he skimmed profits from. In that moment, in the quiet of his office, surrounded by the trappings of his power, Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson felt a helplessness he hadn't known since he was a boy. He walked to the window and leaned his forehead against the cool glass. Below, the streets of Harlem slept, his kingdom. A kingdom he had failed to protect from itself. For the first time in over 20 years, Junebug saw his boss's shoulders shake. Not in rage, but in a silent, terrible grief. The search wasn't for a hostage anymore. It was a race against an overdose. February 14th, 1962, 4 a.m. The mobilization was different now. It was no longer about heavy weapons and intimidation. It was about speed and information. The countdown had begun. Every minute that passed, the poison in Sonny Capone's veins was doing its work. I want little Vic. Bumpy's voice was a blade of ice. I don't want him hurt. I don't want him spooked. I want him sitting in this office in 1 hour. And I want every junkie, dealer, and user who owes us a goddamn thing on the street. I want to know everything that happens in every shooting gallery, flop house, and tenement between Central Park and the river. Go. The command structure of his organization, honed over decades of street warfare and criminal enterprise, was turned toward a single, desperate purpose. Men who normally collected debts were now knocking on the doors of terrified addicts. Women who ran numbers were now whispering questions in back alleys. The full weight of Bumpy's empire was leveraged not to make money or seize power, but to find one lost soul. February 14th, 1962, 5:15 a.m. They brought little Vic in. He was a wiry man in his late 20s, arrogant and sharp-eyed, but the swagger evaporated the moment he saw Bumpy's face. He knew this wasn't about business. You had a customer, Bumpy said, his voice devoid of emotion. A white man. Looked like a businessman. Yesterday, Vic started to sweat. He looked at Junebug, then back at Bumpy, seeking an angle, a way out. A lot of guys come through Bump. Bumpy moved faster than Vic could track. He crossed the room and grabbed the front of Vic's shirt, lifting him half out of his chair. His face was inches from the dealer's. His name is Capone. He was my guest. My guest. He is under my protection. So you are going to tell me, right now, which hellhole you sent him to, or I will personally introduce you to a kind of pain you have never imagined. Fear broke through Vic's composure. I didn't know Bump. I swear. He just came to me, asking for something to take the edge off. Said he was under a lot of pressure. I sold him a bag. I just pointed him to a place where he could be quiet. A building on 117th, near Madison. Top floor. Bumpy dropped him back into the chair. Junebug. Get the car. You and me. The rest of you, lock this place down. Nobody in or out. He stays here. He looked at little Vic, and the dealer saw in Bumpy's eyes not the anger of a boss, but the disgust of a man looking at a disease. Pray we find him alive. It's the only thing that will keep you breathing. February 14th, 1962, 5:45 a.m. A tenement on 117th Street. The stench hit them in the lobby. It was a thick, gagging miasma of stale sweat, urine, decay, and the sickly sweet smell of cooked heroin. It was the smell of human surrender. The building was a hollowed-out carcass, home only to rats and ghosts. They took the stairs, Bumpy in the lead, his hand inside his coat, gripping a small, heavy pistol. Not for the junkies. They were no threat, but for the sheer violation of this place, for the rage that needed a target. The top floor was a single, long hallway with doors hanging off their hinges. Moans and whispers leaked from the rooms. This wasn't a home. It was a tomb for the living. Junebug pointed to the last door on the left. It was slightly ajar. Bumpy pushed it open. The room was nearly bare. A single mattress, stained black with filth, lay in the corner. A bare bulb hanging from a wire cast a jaundiced, pitiless light over the scene. There were three figures in the room, skeletal and sallow. Their humanity burned away to the raw nerve of addiction. One was a young woman, her eyes rolled back in her head. Another was an old man, rocking silently, his skin the color of ash. And on the mattress, curled in a fetal position, was Sonny Capone. He was unrecognizable. His gray flannel suit was soiled and torn. His face was a waxy, pale mask, his lips tinged with blue. A syringe lay on the floor beside his outstretched hand, next to a small, scorched spoon. His breathing was a shallow, ragged whisper, a death rattle in the making. He was drowning on dry land. For a long moment, Bumpy just stood there, framed in the doorway. This was the true face of the enemy. It had no gun, no territory, no name. It was an emptiness that consumed everything. He saw the end result of every dollar he'd ever taken from the trade, the human cost tallied on a filthy mattress in his own kingdom. The man lying there wasn't the son of a gangster. He was a father, a husband, a man who sold flowers, and Bumpy's promise to him lay shattered on the floor next to the needle. He looked at Junebug, and his face was a mask of cold fury and profound self-loathing. "Get him up," he commanded, his voice cracking with the effort of control. Now, February 14th, 1962, 6:10 a.m. The extraction was a grim, silent ballet. Bumpy and Junebug lifted Sonny's dead weight. He was limp, his head lolling back, a thin line of spittle on his chin. They carried him down the rotting staircase, past spectral faces that peered out from darkened doorways, their eyes vacant, incurious. No one spoke. No one interfered. In this place, the only thing that mattered was the next fix. The living were already ghosts. Outside, the pre-dawn air was cold and clean, a shocking contrast to the suffocating rot of the building. They laid Sonny in the back of Bumpy's Lincoln. He looked like a corpse being delivered to the undertaker. "Doc Feltner's," Bumpy said as he got behind the wheel, his knuckles white. "Call him. Tell him we're coming in. Tell him it's an overdose. Heroin." Junebug nodded, using the car's radiophone. Doc Feltner was a retired Army surgeon who had lost his license over a gambling addiction. He was also the best damn doctor Bumpy knew, a man who could patch a bullet wound or treat a disease with no questions asked, for the right price. His office was a discreet brownstone on the edge of Harlem, a place where the rules of the outside world did not apply. They arrived minutes later. Feltner, a weary man with bloodshot eyes and impossibly steady hands, was waiting. He took one look at Sonny and went to work. "How much did he take?" Feltner asked, stripping off Sonny's jacket. "We don't know," Bumpy said, his voice tight. Feltner checked Sonny's pupils with a penlight. They were pinned. He listened to his chest. His respiration is failing. Heartbeat is thready. He's close to the edge. He filled a syringe with naloxone, a drug that could reverse the opiate's effects. This might bring him around, but it's going to be violent. The withdrawal will be instantaneous and brutal. You'll have to hold him down. He plunged the needle into Sonny's thigh. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, Sonny's body arched back with a violent, inhuman gasp. His eyes flew open, but they were wild, unseeing. He began to choke and vomit, a foul, bilious fluid. Bumpy and Junebug grabbed his thrashing limbs, pinning him to the examination table as he screamed, a raw, ragged sound of pure agony. It was the sound of a soul being ripped back from the precipice of death. Bumpy held Sonny's shoulder, his own body rigid, his face impassive. But inside, he felt every tremor, every scream, as a personal indictment. He had allowed the serpent into his garden, and it had bitten his guest. As Doc Feltner worked to stabilize Sonny, Bumpy walked out of the examination room. He looked at Junebug. "Stay with him. Don't leave his side," he ordered. "I have to go back to the office. I have to fire an employee." February 14th, 1962, 8 a.m. When Bumpy walked back into his office above the Capri, little Vic was still there, guarded by two of Bumpy's men. The dealer shot to his feet, his face a mixture of hope and terror. Did you find him?" Vic stammered. Bumpy walked to his desk and sat down. He opened a drawer and took out a heavy, snub-nosed revolver, placing it on the blotter between them. "He's alive," Bumpy said quietly. "No thanks to you." Vic started babbling, a torrent of excuses and apologies. "I didn't know who he was. Bump, I swear to God. He was just another John. I never would have sold to him if I knew he was your guest. You know that? You're right, Bumpy said, his eyes drilling into the dealer. You didn't know he was my guest, but you knew he was a man, a father, a husband, somebody's son. You sold him poison. You took my money, you operated in my territory, and you pushed a product I told you to stay away from. You did this in my house. He stood up and walked around the desk, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't pick up the gun. You betrayed the community that feeds you. That poison you sell, it rots from the inside. It turns good men into ghosts. It makes mothers sell their bodies and sons rob their own families. It's a cancer, and you are the one spreading it. He stopped in front of little Vic. The dealer was trembling, expecting a bullet. But Bumpy's violence was more personal, more righteous. His hand shot out, not in a punch, but in a grab, his fingers clenching the dealer's jaw, forcing it open. With his other hand, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glassine bag, the dope they had found on the floor next to Sonny. You like this product so much? Bumpy whispered, his voice a venomous hiss. You want to see what it does? He brought the bag toward Vic's mouth. The dealer's eyes went wide with terror, and he began to struggle, making muffled, panicked sounds. Bumpy held him fast. He didn't force the drugs down his throat. He just held it there, inches from his lips, forcing him to smell it, to face the filth he peddled. This is what you sell. This is the hell you put people in. You did this to a man under my protection. You brought this shame on my name. He threw the dealer back into the chair. Vic was crying now, shuddering with a fear that went beyond a simple beating. It was the fear of a man who had been shown the true nature of his own soul. Get out, Bumpy said, his voice flat. You're done. You will not work in Harlem again. You will not live in Harlem again. I want you gone by sunset. If I ever see your face north of 96th Street, I will kill you myself. He turned his back on him, a sign of ultimate dismissal. And the money you made from that sale? You will give every last dollar to his family. Every 1 inch. Little Vic scrambled out of the office, a broken man. Bumpy stood at the window, breathing heavily. The act of violence had brought no satisfaction, only a deeper sense of failure. He hadn't solved the problem. He had only banished one symptom of the disease. The plague was still in his city, and Sonny Capone was still fighting for his life. February 14th, 1962, 3 p.m., Doc Feltner's brownstone. The next 3 days were a descent into a shared hell. Sonny Capone was alive, but his body and mind were a battlefield. The instantaneous withdrawal had saved his life, but now he had to endure the consequences. Bumpy refused to leave. He had a cot brought into a spare room next to the examination area and personally oversaw the ordeal. He delegated all his street business to his lieutenants, his entire world shrinking to the confines of this brownstone and the suffering of the man within it. This was his penance. Day 1. The physical torment was relentless. Sonny's body was a riot of rebellion. He convulsed with violent muscle spasms, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. He sweated profusely one moment, shivering with a bone-deep chill the next. He couldn't keep down water, vomiting until there was nothing left but dry, agonizing heaves. Through it all, he cried out, sometimes in pain, sometimes for his wife, his daughters, his father. Bumpy and Junebug took turns holding him, cleaning him, speaking to him in low, soothing tones, though it was unclear if he heard them. Bumpy felt like a priest administering last rites to a man who was already in purgatory. Day 2. The physical symptoms began to subside, replaced by a psychological horror show. The heroin had suppressed a deep well of pain in Sonny, and now it all came flooding back. He was lucid in flashes, but mostly he was trapped in a delirium of paranoia and despair. He saw things in the corners of the room. He spoke to his father, Al Capone, sometimes arguing with him, sometimes begging for his approval. I tried, Pop, he sobbed during one terrifying episode, his eyes fixed on an empty corner. I tried to be a good man. I sell flowers. Not whiskey, not blood. Flowers. But your name, it's so heavy. I can't breathe. Bumpy sat by his bedside, listening to the raw, unfiltered agony of a man crushed by a legacy he never asked for. He saw not a gangster's son, but a universal story of a son trying to escape his father's shadow. In that dark, quiet room, Bumpy Johnson, the King of Harlem, felt a profound connection to this broken man. They were both trapped by their names, by the kingdoms they had inherited or built. Day 3. Exhaustion finally claimed Sonny. He slept for 12 straight hours. When he woke, the delirium had passed. His eyes were clear for the first time, though they were sunk deep in his skull. He was weak, emaciated, but he was himself. He looked at Bumpy, sitting in a chair by his bed. "Johnson," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "I'm here, son," Bumpy said softly. Sonny's eyes filled with tears of shame. "What did I do?" "You stumbled," Bumpy said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Now you get up. The fall is not what defines a man. It's the getting up." Bumpy had been busy during the lucid moments. He had used his vast network of connections, not the criminal ones, but the ones he maintained through carefully placed favors and political donations. He found a place upstate, a private sanitarium, quiet and discreet, that specialized in treating addiction for the wealthy and powerful. It would cost a fortune, but money was the one thing Bumpy had. "I'm sending you somewhere," Bumpy explained. "A place where you can heal. No one will know your name. You can rest, get strong. When you're ready, you can go home to your family." Sonny just nodded, too weak to argue, too grateful to speak. He looked at the man who had pulled him from the abyss, a Harlem gangster who had shown him more compassion than he had ever known. "Why?" Sonny finally managed to ask. "Why are you doing this?" Bumpy looked out the window at the gray city. "I gave you my word," he said. "I told you that you were safe in my house. I failed. This is me, trying to make it right." Witness testimony, Junius, Junebug, Henderson. Recorded 1988. Those 3 days. I saw a different Bumpy. The boss was gone. The king was gone. It was just a man. A man trying to clean up a mess that he felt, deep down, was his fault. He never left that man's side. When Sonny was screaming, Bumpy was there. When he was sick, Bumpy cleaned it up himself. He wouldn't let me do it. He said it was his responsibility. I think in Sonny Capone, Bumpy saw a reflection, not of himself, but of what his world did to people. The collateral damage. He saw this fella who was trying to be good get swallowed by the same poison Bumpy profited from. It changed him. He got colder about the drug business after that. He'd still tax it. He had to. It was too big to stop. But the look in his eye when he talked about it, the disgust, it was real. Saving Sonny Capone cost him a lot more than money. It cost him his illusions. November 20th, 1963. United States Penitentiary, Alcatraz Island, California. The feds had been watching. Bumpy knew they always were, but the frantic, high-profile search for a man named Capone had put a spotlight on his organization that he couldn't deflect. They didn't get him for murder or racketeering. They never could. They got him the same way they got Sonny's father. Taxes. A mountain of paperwork, a clever prosecutor, and a jury that saw the King of Harlem and threw the book at him. Conspiracy to impede the Internal Revenue Service. 15 years. They sent him to Alcatraz, the Rock, a place designed to make men forget the outside world existed. His kingdom was left in the capable hands of his lieutenants, but his reign was over. He was no longer a king, just a number. AZ 1517. The irony was not lost on him. He was in a cell once occupied by the men he'd fought his whole life, including, for a time, Al Capone himself. But in the crushing isolation of Alcatraz, a strange thing happened. A correspondence began. The first letter arrived 3 months into his sentence, forwarded from his lawyer. The envelope was plain, the return address from a small town in upstate New York. It was from Sonny. January 15th, 1964. Mr. Johnson, they told me where you are. I am sorry. It feels like this is my fault, and that is a weight I will carry always. I hope you can forgive me. The place you sent me, it worked. I've been here for almost a year. It was hard. Harder than anything I've ever done. But I'm clean. The doctors say I can go home next month. I think a lot about those days in that brownstone. You never judged me. You just helped me. You told me it's the getting up that defines a man. I'm trying to get up. I'm trying to stand on my own 2 feet, maybe for the first time in my life. I owe you that. I owe you everything. Your friend, Albert F. Capone. Bumpy read the letter a dozen times. In the cold, damp air of his cell, it was a spark of warmth. He wrote back, his words spare but carefully chosen. Albert, you owe me nothing. Your debt is to your family. Be a good husband. Be a good father. That's all the payment I require. Stay on your feet. E.J. So began their unlikely friendship, a dialogue conducted across a continent, between a prison cell and a quiet suburban life. The letters became a lifeline for Bumpy, a connection to a world beyond the gray walls and the clang of steel doors. September 8, 1965. Ellsworth. My daughter, Diane, started first grade today. She was so proud, with her new dress and her lunchbox. My wife, she cried. I almost did too. I thought about how I almost missed that. I never would have seen that day if not for you. I run the flower shop now. My partner retired. It's all mine. It's not much, but it's honest. And it's enough. We have a small house with a yard. I wish you could see it. Albert. Bumpy kept the letters. He kept the faded photograph Sonny enclosed of his daughter on the school steps. He looked at it every night before he slept. It was a reminder of a different kind of legacy. Not one of power or fear, but of one small act of redemption. He had saved a man, and in doing so, had saved a family. He had used the power he'd gained from a life of crime to create something good, something clean. He served 4 years before the Supreme Court invalidated his conviction on a technicality. The government, tired of fighting him, let him go. July 11, 1967. Curbside, San Francisco International Airport. Bumpy Johnson walked out of the gates of Alcatraz a free man, but older, thinner. The fire in his eyes was banked, replaced by a quiet, weary wisdom. Junebug was waiting for him at the airport, loyal as ever. The Lincoln was new, but the man behind the wheel was the same. Where to, Bump? Junebug asked, his voice thick with emotion. Back to Harlem? The throne is waiting. Bumpy got in the car and looked out at the California sunshine, a world away from the fog of the Bay and the grit of New York. He was silent for a long time. No, he said finally. Not yet. There's one stop I have to make first. He handed Junebug a slip of paper with an address on it. An address in a quiet, tree-lined suburb in Florida. Take me there. The drive took days. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. It was a pilgrimage. As they drove south, the landscape changed from the arid hills of California to the green humidity of the South. Bumpy felt like he was traveling not just across the country, but across his own life, from the man he was to the man he had become. July 15, 1967. 4:30 p.m. A suburban street in Miami, Florida. The house was modest. A small, white bungalow with a neatly trimmed lawn and a rose bush climbing a trellis by the front door. A child's bicycle lay on its side in the driveway. It was the picture of American tranquility. It was a world Bumpy Johnson had only ever seen from the outside. Junebug pulled the car over to the curb. This is it, Bump. Bumpy didn't move for a full minute. He just stared at the house. This was the kingdom he had saved. Not the sprawling, violent, vibrant kingdom of Harlem, but this small patch of peace. Then the front door opened. A man came out, holding a watering can. He was heavier than Bumpy remembered, his face filled out, tanned by the sun. He wore a simple polo shirt and slacks. He looked happy. He looked free. It was Sonny Capone. He saw the Lincoln and froze. He squinted, his eyes widening in disbelief. He dropped the watering can, and it clattered on the concrete path. He started walking, then running, toward the car. Bumpy got out. The two men stood on the quiet street, separated by a lifetime of violence, tragedy, and an unlikely bond forged in hell. Sonny stopped a few feet away, his face working with a decade's worth of unspoken gratitude. Tears welled in his eyes. Ellsworth, he breathed, the name full of reverence and love. Hello, Albert, Bumpy said, a rare, small smile touching his lips. Sonny closed the distance and wrapped his arms around the older man. He held on tight, a son embracing a father. I knew you'd come, he whispered. I knew it. A woman came to the door of the house, followed by 2 young girls. Sonny waved them over. Come here, he called out, his voice thick. Come and meet the man I told you about. The man who saved my life. He introduced his wife and his daughters. The girls looked up at Bumpy with shy curiosity. This tall, stern-looking man was the hero from their father's stories. Sonny put his arm around Bumpy's shoulder and guided him toward the house. Come inside, he said. Dinner's almost ready. You're home. Bumpy looked at the small, perfect house. He looked at the family standing on the lawn. He looked at the man beside him, a man reborn. He had lost his kingdom in Harlem, done his time in the belly of the beast, but standing here, on this quiet street, he felt a sense of peace he had never known. This was his true legacy. Not the power, not the money, not the fear he commanded. It was this. One life, pulled back from the brink. It was more than enough. It was everything.